You are listening to Women's Running Stories, where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences.
Hi, everyone. My name is Birdie Wermy, and I'm originally from Oklahoma, but I grew up here in Portland, Oregon, and reside in the town of Tualatin, which is about 15 minutes south of Portland, and I have a daughter and a son.
Hello and welcome to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And yes, you are about to hear the running story of Birdie Wermy. Birdie is a member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. And like she mentioned, she now lives in Oregon. And I got to meet Birdie this past October in Chicago. She was there running the marathon as part of the Native Women Run team. And if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll remember hearing from Birdie in the live recording of the panel conversation with the Native Women Run team, which I got to co-host with Cindy Kuzma of the Starting Line 1928 podcast. We were live on the main stage at the Chicago Marathon Expo, and we got to hear all the running stories of the women on that NWR team. And also joining us on the live stage was Native Women Run founder, Verna Volker. And I have also had Verna on the show, and I'm going to go ahead and link to both the live conversation from Chicago as well as Verna's episode, so you can look to the show notes and find links to those episodes. And if you aren't familiar with Native Women Run, they are a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering and supporting Native women in running. And, I'll also link to their Instagram account because Native Women Run is a great follow. And after the panel discussion, I was curious to learn more about Birdie's running story. So I invited her on to tell her story here. And you are going to hear all about her experience at Chicago, as well as how she got into running and the journey she's had in the sport up until this day. A few things to know before we dive into this episode. Birdie works for the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, and she's been with the organization for many years. Also, you're going to hear Birdie mention Mary Beth toward the end of her story, and that is Mary Beth Johnson, who is the Associate Director of Community Engagement and Social Impact for the Chicago Marathon. All right, now we are ready to hear this episode, so let's get to it. Let's hear Birdie Wermy's running story, starting with her first memories of running back in grade school. Here to tell her story is Birdie Wermy.
I was in third grade, and we had our very first jogathon, and I believe my family had sponsored me per lap. And so when that day came, my mom came to the school and was a volunteer, and we ran around a track, and it wasn't like your original typical track, but it was made of bark dust, and you had to run around so many times for it to equal a mile. And I just remember running, and every time I ran by, they would give you these little, I don't even know what they're called. They're like those little wooden, almost like the little wooden stir sticks for your coffee or tea. And I just remember holding all of them, collecting them, and really actually feeling for the first time what it was like to compete against others and to want to win. And then that's kind of what shaped me with other sports and wanting to always be the best that I could when I was competing.
Running kicked off Birdie's first spark of being a competitor, and she channeled that competitive drive into basketball. She played that sport up through college. And running continued to weave into those athletic experiences too.
So when I went to college, I was recruited to play at a community college here in Oregon. And I had other offers and made my decision to go to Southwestern Oregon Community College, which is located in Coos Bay. And when I went there, it was the calling of the ocean, the water, the smell, just everything, the whole environment, everything was so different. And I really enjoyed being at the beach, being able to, get in my car and go 5 mile or take 5 miles or 5 minutes to get to the beach. But as part of our conditioning, our basketball coach always made sure that we were in long distance running shape. And one of our conditioning was to run at the beach. We had to do 3 miles, and the guards, I was a guard, we all had to be in the front. We had to like set the pace, and we had to not come in last. And I was running barefoot. I don't know if we all were, but I know I was running barefoot because I can remember the texture under my feet. I can feel for the very first time what it's like to feel grounded and just have, like, the natural earth under my feet and to be running. But yeah, that's one memory that I have where I really feel like that running spirit had been awakened in me like it had been when I was in third grade. So after I finished playing my 2 years at Southwestern Oregon Community College, I was recruited to finish my career at Warner Pacific University, and same regimen, same long distance conditioning. And so when we ran, again, being a guard, you had to lead and you had to be in the front, and we had to get our mile times under a certain time. And there was always me and my one teammate. We would always compete against each other when it came to long distance running. And every single time she beat me, every single time. And I remember when we would finish, our coach would kind of encourage us to, go run back and go find your teammates and go encourage them, the ones that are, still got a block to run, go back and find them and run with them and encourage them. But it was also about being a leader. So we would run back. We would run all the way back to where the last teammate was, and we would finish with them. And sometimes it was grueling, sometimes it was fun, and sometimes it just was like, what are we doing? Like, I didn't sign up for this. After college, I kind of ran here and there. I think the longest distance I ever did was a 5K. My mom was we took part of the Susan G. Komen Foundation when they ran their Race for the Cure. Every year they had it here in Portland, and she always would run or she would walk, and I would always go with her. And I didn't even compete then. I was just out there supporting my mom, running with her or walking with her. And sometimes I would get competitive and like end up running ahead of her, and then I would come back and find her, and we would cross the finish line together. But it wasn't until later in life, in my 30s, that I really decided to take on running. So it was about probably, I would say 2015. I had just had my son. He was about 10 weeks old. And up here in Oregon, they have the Hood to Coast relay. So you start at Mount Hood, and you run about 200 miles from Mount Hood to Seaside, Oregon. And I have always known of the Hood to Coast relay. Again, my mom, they have a running team and they have a walking team. The walking team starts in Portland, and you walk from Portland to Seaside. And my mom was involved with Hood to Coast, even back when I was like in college and in my early 20s. And she would always say like, oh, I'm part of this walking team, and I'll be starting here if you want to come down to Portland and see me and, watch me walk across the bridge. So yeah, I would always go and support her. And, and I thought I could never walk. Like, it was just something that was so far out of my mind to even ever consider. And then it wasn't until 2016 or 2015 when I was approached by my coworker, and she said, hey, I did the Hood to Coast relay this year. It was amazing. I would love for our organization to get a running team together and, be one of the first Native running organizations to, hopefully be accepted into the Hood to Coast Relay. And she's like, and she was leaving our organization, but wanted to continue this and asked me to be a captain. And I was, first of all, I just had a son. So I was, still in that weird postpartum, and your body's weird and your emotions are weird. And at that same time in 2015, when she had asked me this, I was going through a divorce. I was in the very beginning of a divorce. So my emotions and my state of mind were not in a good place. And she said, like, I would love for you to do this. I think you're a great leader. You could be a really good captain. This is what it entails. And so the Hood to Coast Relay is a lottery system. And you basically fill out an application, you mail it in on a certain day. It can't be mailed in any earlier or later. So we did that and we got in. We got in, and I just was like, what am I doing? Maybe this is going to help me in some way, and I didn't even think of the mental and physical part. I just thought it's going to give me something to do to keep my mind off of everything that is going on in my life right now. And so I decided in February of 2016 to just sign up for a 10K and see where I'm at, and set goals and see what my mile time is, and and went from there. And then I was training with my kids because I had gotten a double jogging stroller, and I was pushing my 3-year-old and my baby. And it was just ridiculous when I think about it now, because that's like 100 pounds, almost 100 pounds that you're pushing while running. So yeah, my running journey started in, I would say, 2016, and tragedy struck our family in April of 2016. My aunt was tragically killed in a car accident. And so not only was I going through my own personal battle with just life in general, but now I had to deal with this. And I had made the decision to start a PhD program at the same time in March of 2016. And why I did that, I think we do things to keep our minds off of what's happening and not having to deal with stuff, numbing and not wanting to deal. And I thought, well, I'll just, stay busy with working, and I'll go back to school, and I'm going to do this. And I just had this like overwhelming sensation of like, I had to prove that I could be a single mom. And in hindsight, it was not healthy, but I also am not a quitter and didn't want to walk away from the program that I had gotten into. So I stayed with the program for 2 years and then decided to take a leave of absence. But during 2016, when I ran the very first Hood to Coast Relay, it was just an amazing experience. Just it was so healing. It was, I was still mourning I was mourning a lot of things at that time, going through grief. And man, if it wasn't for just that challenge of training and trying to find myself again at, now 33 years old with kids, and find my identity again. Yeah, it reawoke that running spirit in me. So I ran Hood to Coast every single year since 2016, and we just did our last race this August. And this August marked the very first year in all of our organization's history where our entire 12-man running relay team were Indigenous runners.
Hood to Coast has been a huge part of Birdie's running journey. In this time as well, she's experienced some other really powerful personal transformations.
I decided that I was going to go into 2020 sober. I was, still healing from, the loss of my aunt and my marriage, and, still accepting the fact that I was going to be a single mom, and, how am I going to do all this stuff, and how am I going to still take care of myself? But I decided to embark on what I call an experiment, if you will. And not it was not something that I had prepared for. It was not something that I had planned. And I wasn't going to start on New Year's Day. It was not going to be no resolution for me. It was going to be, I'm going to go into 2020, I'm not going to have one last hurrah, but I had, drinking and running do not mix. You can't drink and party one night and expect to get up and run a really great race the next day. And I had been doing that, racing, trying to run and trying to, alcohol was beginning to be a part of like, oh, well, it's okay. Like you just run for fun. You're not training for anything, and you're not going to be any faster. You're not going to, it was just always alcohol was the way that I coped with things. And as I got older and started drinking a little bit more, and I decided that I was done. I chose my running over alcohol, and I decided that I was going to go into 2020 alcohol free, and I was going to see and compare my running times. That was the goal. Was to see how much alcohol affected my running and how much better I could be without it. And the goal was to only do it for 90 days. And why I chose 90 days, I really don't know. I think because it takes 90 days to break a habit. So I've been told. So we went with 90 days. And then we all know what happened in March of 2020 when the world shut down. So I had signed up for all these races. I was holding out that one of them would take place, and it was going to be my second half marathon because I had just done my very first half marathon in September of 2019. And my whole goal with that one was just to do it in 2 hours. And I think I did it in like 2 hours and 2 minutes or 1 minute or something. So I already had a goal in mind when I was giving up alcohol, was to train for my next half marathon and get it under 2 hours. So that didn't happen. I mean, the race didn't happen. None of the races happened in 2020. All of them were canceled. And then the next thing I know, it's June 2020. And within that time, between April and June, I had this spiritual awakening. So I'm also an instructor at a local community college here in Portland. And I'm teaching students, young adults, those who are in high school that are taking college credit classes on alcohol and drugs. I'm teaching about alcohol in the family. I'm teaching about personal health and wellness. I'm teaching about women's health. And I just could not teach to these students about drugs and alcohol when I was drinking. I wasn't going to class drunk. I wasn't teaching drunk, but a part of me just did not feel that I could teach 100% if I was doing those things. So, and within that time, while I was teaching, I invite a speaker in. And the man that I had invited in 2018 to speak to my class was the same person I invited in 2020. And he shared his story about the day that he decided to drink and drive. And he ended up taking the life of a mother and her daughter. And when he told that story, I had so much resentment. I had so much pain. I had so much sadness because I'm still grieving the loss of my aunt. And I felt hateful. I carried so much pain and hate and sadness for those years. But that day when he came into my class for the second time and told that story, I felt like I was finally able to give up alcohol for good and live this alcohol-free life and never look back, never have any regrets, and start working on forgiveness, forgiving the man who killed my aunt. And it wasn't until that time that I had shared my story with the man who came into my class, and I told him, what happened to my family. And I had never shared with him before. And it was so powerful. He hugged me, I hugged him, and I'm still in touch with him today, but that was definitely the turning point. That was the spiritual awakening. Everybody has experiences, I think, some form of this one way or another, but that was my defining moment. I call it my revelation because that was when I knew I could, because I was still holding on, like I still wanted to like run my half marathon in June, and I was just gonna drink as soon as I was done. That's all I kept looking forward to. And I honestly think if the pandemic hadn't happened, things could have very well have gone left for me. So here I am, and I will be celebrating 5 years on December 27th of this year. So we talk about the spiritual aspect of running, and I would definitely say that once I gave up alcohol and started running all through the pandemic, that's how I found Native women running. I was just I was just looking, I was researching, I was trying to find anything and everything that was going to motivate me, support me, inspire me. And that's when I found Native women running. I remember Googling it like on Instagram and just in general, like trying Indigenous women running, Indigenous women run, local runs near me. I was looking up everything. And so that's really when I just grasped Native Women Run, and I ended up meeting a lot of women up here in the area that I'm friends with now, that I've been friends with since 2021. And then lo and behold, what do we share in common? Not just running, but sobriety. So it's been an amazing journey, and I would definitely say that after getting sober, it just opened this spiritual aspect and life with running. And after 2020, it was 2021, I was training for Hood to Coast. It was like June or July, and we were watching my son and I. So my son was 5 years old at the time, and we were watching the Ironman race, and he was just like, "Mom, like, what's that? Why are they like, what?" He was so curious about every single aspect of the race, the swimming, the bike riding, and then the running. and he's like, "Wow." And then just in a second, he just looks at me and he goes, "Mom, you could run a marathon. I believe in you." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Really?" And I'm just looking at him and I'm thinking, of all of the things that I just told you what a triathlon is, that's all you heard was marathon. You didn't hear biking. You didn't hear swimming, you know? So I sat there and I thought about it, and I had never done because the Portland Marathon is in October, and it's always the marathon or the half. There's never been any other races, 5K, 10K, nothing else. So I looked at my calendar and I thought, well, let me look at Hal Higdon's marathon training plan, because that's literally all I knew, because that's what I had been following for the half marathon. So I looked at his marathon training plan and I matched it up with my training that I was currently doing and then the training for Hood to Coast. And I thought, wow, this is like spot on, like the dates, the days, everything. So I took a chance and I just said, well, either we're going to know if this is going to be something for me or it's not. And so I ran my very first marathon in October at the Portland Marathon, and that has been my best time ever. I've come within a minute of breaking it, but nope, that was my first marathon, was in 2021, and it just took off from there.
Birdie's marathon journey did take off from there. As of the end of 2024, Birdie has completed 7 marathons. And regardless of her finishing time, she has continued to have really powerful experiences, like at this year's Chicago Marathon.
This was my first, big World Abbott major. And so I get to the start and the weather was perfect that day. It wasn't windy like the day before. and everything went well. But yeah, as we ran, I just soaked everything in. I had never seen Lake Michigan. The day before, we were out there doing an interview and taking pictures, and I'd never seen that. My mom had made my yellow ribbon skirt that I wore there the day before, specifically for that. And purple is my favorite color, and it just so happened that Chicago's color was purple for the race. So I felt like it was my race. But yeah, I just remembered thinking, in every race, I tell myself, run with your feet open, run with your toes open, don't tense up your shoulders, relax your arms, breathe. And the next thing I know, I just kept telling myself, make it to mile 6, make it to mile 9. Okay, make it to the half point. In the half, for me, I like to refer to it as the turn. My dad's a golfer, and I also used to be a golfer with him, but he would always say, like, oh, I'm at the turn now. So, that means he's taking the turn at hole 9 going to 10. So I would always tell my parents, like, oh, I'm at the turn now. I'm at mile 13. I've got the last half, the last 9 holes to run. but but yeah, that was the point when I just remember coming around the corner and just seeing all the buildings. I had never seen skyscrapers. I am only reminded of our buildings. I will call them buildings in Portland. And so I had never seen anything any larger than that. And I don't normally take pictures when I run, but I thought, oh, I need to share this with my parents. I just need to take a picture of these buildings and just do a quick, photo of myself. And then that was it. And I sent it to him and I said, I'm at the turn, and that's it. And when I made the turn and let my family know, it's like, that's where automatically my body just went on autopilot. And I would say that it's the runner's high for sure, 100%. But it also, you go into this place where only way I can explain it is an out of body experience. The body's moving, the arms are going, the legs are going, and you're just kind of up there in your head watching everything. And I will say that the experience that I had in Chicago will not compare to any of the other races that I've done. Every marathon is different. Every marathon has taught me something different. But this last one in Chicago, man, this went above and beyond the spiritual aspect. I was above the runner's high, and it was just amazing. It was beautiful. I feel like I'm so closely connected to my ancestors when I'm in that moment. I feel like I can hear them, maybe sometimes see them, not necessarily, like in person, but I can feel them. But yeah, it's just this place that you don't know is there until you are fully pushing yourself, and the body can do amazing things. If that's one thing I know about running, is it'll take you to this beautiful place. And the only other close spiritual part that I had felt remotely close to this was when I ran in Hawaii. I did the Honolulu Marathon in December of 2022, and I didn't think anything could ever compare to that or take me above that, but Chicago did. And I don't know, some people say they've never felt the runner's high, but it's almost like you can't explain it until you're in it. And I don't even remember, like, the girls were asking me, like, oh, did you run under the arches? Do you remember the arches, from Chinatown? And I was like, I think so. And they're like, what? And I was like, I don't know. I don't remember. And I could have just been in that moment where I was on, where I was on autopilot for 10 miles. But yeah, 10 miles for sure. And I think what I do remember the most was when we made it through the neighborhoods, the music that was playing, and the different instruments that were happening at that time, and just how it sounded like a block party. And I was just remember thinking like, wow, this is so cool. Like there's so many people here. They look forward to this every year and they get to come out and celebrate and, be along this course. And I think more than anything, I was blown away at how many spectators there were along the entire route. I can't even believe that the entire 26.2 miles were lined with people cheering, lined with families and kids, and just, it was so incredible. It was like magic, just feeling the energy, feeling other people's energy and the other runners, being with other runners, and just being in that environment. It was amazing. And I think for me, running and meeting these ladies for the very first time with Native women running, we met Mary Beth, and she was at the finish line. I wasn't expecting to see anybody that I knew or even recognized at the finish line. And when I saw her, she's just like, Birdie. And I'm like, oh my God. And she hugged me and I hugged her. And at all of the races that I ever do and ever compete in, my mom is there supporting me, meaning that she is there volunteering. And usually she finds her way to the finish line and she will have my medal and she will either be wearing it or she'll give it to me. But I always see her at the finish line. She will record me at the finish line. And I hug her at the finish line, and so having Mary Beth do that, it was like, I knew a part of my family was there at that time because I didn't, I was like, I'm going to cross the finish line. I don't know anybody and I don't even know where I'm supposed to go, and Mary Beth was there and she had water for me, and I was just like, oh, thank you so much, so that was really important. That really meant so much to me because, I'm in a place that I'd never been before either. And so just going with the flow and going with the crowd, but she was tracking all of us and she was there and she saw all of our, she saw the whole Native Women Run group finish. So that was really special, really, really special, really important, and just made me feel so good, that a part of my mom and my family were there. And then even after I got back home, I am not kidding you, I would say for an entire week, I dreamt that I was still running the marathon. And I have never had it affect me that way, where in my dreams, in my unconscious state, that I'm still running. And I waited about 10 days or 12 days before I ran again. And when I ran, it felt the same way. It felt like I was still running in Chicago. It was amazing.
It really is amazing. I mean, what a powerful experience. Congratulations to Birdie on completing her 7th marathon, and I wish Birdie many more powerful running experiences ahead. That does bring us to the end of Birdie's running story on the podcast. Thank you so much, Birdie, for coming on the podcast again and sharing your whole story here. I really appreciate it. Now, you can join me in keeping up with Birdie's running journey through social media. I will link to her Instagram account in the show notes. And there you will also find the link to the episode of the live recording from the Chicago Marathon Expo. And I will also include a link to Verna Volker's episode in the show notes. Oh, as well as a link to the Native Women Run Instagram account. And that does bring us to the end of this episode. Thank you once again so much for being here. I always appreciate you coming here and listening to these stories. And I do have an ask. Please share this podcast with someone else you know will enjoy these stories too. Thank you. That is going to be a wrap for me for this week. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I'm the host and producer of Women's Running Stories. And until next Tuesday, I do wish you healthy, joyful strides forward. Women's running. Women's running stories.
There is no hood like parenthood. When you meet a fellow parent, you just kind of get each other on a whole nother level. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. I interview changemakers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, aka their mom sense and dad sense. I've had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton. It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
Episodes release every Thursday. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Join my tribe at thatstotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you.